Hello, ministers. This is Micah Rossi again with Kerrville ISD, your local LSSP. Thanks for joining me today for session 2 of our crisis response intervention training system, Linking Up. This is where we're integrating ministerial support into our school-based crisis response. So we're going to cover a little bit of the material that we covered last time, but in greater detail. So without further ado, let's look at what we're exploring today. So here's our quick crisis response review. Remember, last time we talked about the 3 phases, comprehensive response system of our current school-based crisis response protocol. The first phase is preparation. We talked about preparation as what we're doing right now. We're online, we're learning, and we're learning in person, having conversations about what it takes to prepare, not only with those skills and abilities, but the mentality that goes along with being crisis responders. The next phase, phase 2, is the response phase, and this phase pertains to those times when we are actually in the field. We're pulling students down into our office. They're coming to find us and intervening with them directly. And finally, the recovery phase. This is post-intervention. This is where we're helping students to continue to receive services, and that means sometimes touching base with them in the community. If it's appropriate, that means referring them to outside resources when need be. Today, for the purposes of session 2, we're going to cover the response phase. This involves stabilization, normalization, and adaptation. We reviewed those briefly last time, stabilization being the phase where we work to help the student calm down and to be in the moment. Normalization, in brief, is where we are helping the students to normalize or make sense of their emotions or feelings, and to also get back to a regular routine, which we oftentimes find solace in as humans. And then finally, adaptation, where we're offering advice, we're giving that support and providing ideas and helping line out a game plan with these students so that they can move forward with their lives. To continue our review, we also defined pastoral crisis intervention. We decided that we must always be purpose-driven in our intentions. We assessed student needs, we looked at those, and we talked about when to integrate spirituality, primarily focusing on identifying a student's receptive expectations versus their receptive state of mind. We also spoke of cultural awareness. You have a great handout that you can download on our website and read through that to get some more idea about that. And we also briefly talked about referring students to the LSSP administrator or school counselors when they're expressing suicidal ideation or intent to self-harm. And now on to a little bit more in detail content. So first we are talking about stabilization and normalization, right? The first 2 phases of our response phase, okay? Stabilization and normalization, you may already know, overlap quite a bit. That's why I have this Venn diagram here. And I don't have the descriptors, but we'll talk about that. So as we're working to stabilize students, when they come into our office, if they're elevated or if they're calm, oftentimes normalization occurs quickly thereafter or even during the stabilization process. So it's important to know that they overlap a great deal. And then when we're talking about the third component, which is adaptation, I don't have it on here right now, that overlaps as well, sometimes with stabilization and normalization. Reason being is that a student may run the gamut of emotions while they're in there with us. They may come in very elevated or very calm, and then quickly either re-elevate or calm down and then re-elevate. It can be all over the place. At any rate, it's important to know that these aren't steadfast, structured, concrete stages that are separated completely. They're overlapping, kind of like the rings of the Olympics, right? They overlap, they intertwine, and it's all connected. So we need to, as we're thinking about these stages, we don't think about them in separate terms. Okay, so we're going to focus in greater detail on the phase of stabilization. The goal of this action is to calm and orient emotionally overwhelmed students. This can look a number of ways. Okay, we talked about overwhelming emotions last time. Maybe they're hyperventilating, maybe they're crying, maybe they're, maybe the overwhelming emotion is that, they're completely shut down. Okay? Sometimes you'll have students come in who are kind of, they're quite lucid. They're kind of thinking reasonably, but they still are seeking solace in someone to talk to. Here I have for you the stabilization spectrum. If you kind of take a look at my little mouse pointer here, this is the stabilization spectrum. And as you can see, it's kind of like a range of, you know, rates at which students are responding to these crises. Here at the left side, you can see that I have slightly overwhelmed, which would require less time for stabilization. In the middle, we have overwhelmed, which would require moderate stabilization, and freaking out, which would require intensive stabilization. Of course, I say this tongue-in-cheek. Freaking out is not the technical term I would normally use for a student who requires intensive stabilization. I'd normally be much, more sensitive to that. But in fact, that's kind of what it looks like. They look like they're kind of freaking out. So we're there to provide intensive stabilization techniques when they're in that state. When they're slightly overwhelmed, we are going to find ourselves moving into the normalization phase, the phase where we're pondering our emotions, and then ultimately creating a plan of action when they're slightly overwhelmed. It is important to note that across the spectrum, the stabilization spectrum, from slightly overwhelmed to completely freaking out overwhelmed, that we need to adhere to the following. First, we need to always respect their privacy. And by respecting their privacy, I say we need to let them know the limits to our confidentiality. We need to let them know that if they, or pose a danger to themselves or others, or if they tell us something that is harmful to themselves, then we have a duty to protect them, not just ethically and professionally, but personally. It's part of our moral fabric, and the reason that we're there is to help them be protected. 99.99% of the times, the students really, really respect and like the fact that we share that with them. We also may need to provide the students a few minutes just to calm down. When a student walks in, of course, a very nice, confident, empathetic introduction, and then maybe providing them a few minutes just to chill out. And if you're not sure about that, ask them, hey, I'm going to give you a few minutes just to hang. I can let you call, if you need some alone time for a few minutes, and I'll come back in and we can talk. And they'll usually agree to that, and they may say, no, I'm cool, I'd like to talk. If you do leave that room and provide them a few minutes to chill out, let them know that you're going to be back soon and really stay near. So there's this little, counseling office that's in the counselor's main area that I use many times when I'm on Tybee campus. Well, the door cracks nicely, and there's a little chair outside. And oftentimes, I'll let students, chill out and ponder things as I'm just sitting on that chair. And maybe I'll ponder my next approach with this student. But to give them that downtime, especially given the fact that you're a stranger, is quite near. Is quite important. So you want to keep busy. You want to continually, be trying to accomplish something, obviously. So you don't want them to know you're just standing outside, watching your watch. Okay, so I'll tell them, hey, I'm going to go make some copies. I'll come back with some papers or something like that. You also want to enlist available family and friends to assist with any of these students. So when I've had students who have been, completely flipping out, when they're hyperventilating, when they're having a rough time, sometimes I'm not enough. Sometimes just me in there is not enough. And so, many times with teenagers, especially and adults, having a friend present, hearing the same thing means more, right? Teenagers really, really hold near and dear to their hearts their friends' opinions. And so if a friend is coming into the room that they feel comfortable with, or a family member is available, if the student's really, really having a tough time, that is oftentimes ideal. You always, no matter what, when we're responding to crisis, want to decrease stimulation. We want a quiet place to talk, to speak softly and quietly. So there, have been instances where we've needed to debrief very large groups of students, whether it's a sports team, a UIL, team event, or if, it's a large classroom. And oftentimes, students will begin to engage in conversations, side conversations, and when you're debriefing. For those students who need that little bit extra, and we invite them to come see us, we have a space set aside, that's quiet. And when we're engaging them, it's not, going to be chaotic. And we're going to have items in there too, like Play-Doh, things to help keep their hands busy, because we know that